Welcome back, brothers and sisters. In today's hobby sermon, we're going to be answering this question: how do you balance/manage consequences in a one-shot? Because as this person points out in their post, that a one-shot sort of has like a foregone conclusion assumed at the end, right? Unlike a campaign, which carries from session to session, there can be setbacks, there could be huge advances in the story. A one-shot kind of, you want everybody to experience the fun in a single night of play. So you do, in a certain sense, need to have things on the rail. But if things are on the rail, how do you have consequences? How is there a sense of tension? And I've got 4 tips to help you maintain that sense of tension in your one shot. So, real quick, don't forget to pay your hobby tithing, leave a like, and let's jump into this. Let us pray. Tip number 1, and the very first thing you should do when you're setting up your one shot, is ask the critical question. And the critical question is, what do your players, or what do the characters have to lose? And especially in the case of a one shot, that doesn't have to mean their lives. A one-shot sense of tension doesn't just have to be, is there a TPK or not? Kind of throughout this video, I'm going to kind of be going with 2 different examples of a one-shot you could be running. One could be your party is escorting a caravan of pilgrims or merchants across a desert that is infested with giant purple worms. We'll make it a very Dune-inspired one-shot. In that case, what does the party have to lose? It could be the lives of the caravan members. It's not the characters that are going to die, per se, but it's all of these other normies, all of these other commoners who are going to get snatched up by purple worms or drown in quicksand or suffer heat stroke. All that kind of stuff is what the party has to lose. And the group that they start with at the beginning might not be the same size of group they end with. So that's one example. Another one shot you might be running is the party is sneaking into Smaug's lair. They're sneaking into a red dragon's dungeon to steal some treasure and escape. But I mean, obviously, there's a threat of getting incinerated with fire. But what if the main thing the party had to lose was the amount of treasure they were able to escape with? What if they went in there with a flying carpet? They were able to load a bunch of the treasure onto that carpet. That was kind of like the job given to them. Like, right here, take this flying carpet, get a bunch of treasure on it, and fly it out. And as they're doing that, as they're going through skill challenges, they're losing or risking losing a certain percentage of that treasure hoard. It's not about dying. It's just about how much are you going to make out in this adventure? Are you going to leave the dungeon with 100% of the treasure that you managed to get? Or are you going to leave with like 10% of it left? And you risked your life for a measly 100 gold pieces, right? Those are 2 examples of consequences, or stakes, I guess. Those terms can kind of be used interchangeably in a lot of ways in this discussion, but those are the stakes of the one shot, and it's not death. So when you're building your one shot, ask that critical question. Tip number 2, utilize failed skill checks to inflict an immediate, minor consequence that can have lasting impacts on the one-shot. A consequence does not have to be a binary yes or no, does the party succeed or fail, live or die. Now, when we get to tip number 4, that does have a place at the table during a one-shot, but in the middle of the session, as you're going through your encounters, you do not want these very swingy, is the party going to live or die consequences? I don't think, because that can end up being like a character dies in the middle of a one-shot and they're just kind of stuck sitting it out. Whereas in a campaign, it's a little easier to bring somebody in, introduce that new character, right? That's sort of on the table in a campaign. But in a one-shot, you don't necessarily want that. So what are some examples of using a failed check as a consequence? In our Desert Caravan Escort one-shot, maybe every time the party fails their survival check at the end of every round to get further and further into the desert and navigate it correctly, if they fail it, it increases the number of purple worms that are hunting the characters. Now, does that mean every time they fail that survival check, there's an immediate combat encounter with a purple worm? No. That would be crazy. You would never get through the one shot. But what it could mean is the party sees off in the distance, or maybe pursuing them behind them, increased purple worm activity. They're burrowing up through the dunes. You can see them just, again, leaning into the dune visuals. They're moving through the sand, sending up these clouds of dust and maybe even creating sandstorms that make future checks harder. That's an interesting way to compound the effects. But then the consequence isn't just that they're seeing they're being pursued. The mechanical impact of that failed check and the consequence could be now every time going forward when the party fails a check that puts some of these caravan members' lives in danger, they don't just lose 1, they lose a D4. And then if they fail another survival check and there's another purple worm pursuing them and they fail some sort of check in the future, now they lose a D6 amount of their caravan members as a purple worm just explodes up through the sand, devouring an entire wagon in their maw and crushing it, and they lose a bunch of characters. And then the caravan flees forward and the one shot continues. It's not a fight with this purple worm. It's just an immediate negative consequence. Now, for our dragon steal the treasure hoard on a flying carpet check, maybe every time the party fails their acrobatics check, the person steering this thing to navigate the dungeon or through these twisting, winding caves, they lose 1d10% of the remaining hoard. So that first time they bump into the wall, 5% of the 10,000 gold piece they lost spills over the edge and clatters down into the cave. And it's like, well, unless you want to super risk stopping and trying to gather that all up and almost immediately having an encounter with the dragon, it's just lost. It's a sunk cost, right? You just got to keep going and hope that you pass future checks and you don't keep losing more and more of this hoard every time. So that's how you can use a failed check to have a immediate consequence in your one shot. Tip number 3, enforce and use timers. You've probably heard me talk about this mechanic a ton on my channel if you've been following me, but a timer is you roll a d4, and in that many rounds, if the party hasn't overcome the challenge you've placed in front of them, something terrible happens. So, in our one-shots, if the party is being pursued by purple worms, maybe you're describing a scene where there's literally like 3 of them burrowing up through the sand, chasing the party. They're just a couple hundred yards behind them. There's this huge rocky bluff. And if the party can reach it and climb it with athletics or acrobatics checks using flight, levitate, all of those types of things, if they can reach the top of it before you roll your d4, 3 rounds, then they save all of the caravan members. They're able to help them all up out of the reach of these purple worms. But if they fail that timer, and there is a character still down somewhere in the sands or still attempting to climb this rocky bluff, then guess what? You lose a few of your caravan members. Maybe that wagon that had your healing potions gets crushed to splinters as the purple worm eats it. And you also lose a few of your caravan members, which hopefully, to add to the tension and the feeling of loss with this consequence, you've given your players opportunities to have some little role play encounters with these caravan members, right? The bug chef who cooks up every night all the bugs, the scorpions and beetles in a pan and fries them and hands them out to everybody. That's the person that gets eaten, and the barbarian's like, "Whoa!" Right? Like, that's how you have those consequences really mean something, and that's how you could use a timer in that example. In our dragon treasure hoard one shot, maybe the party comes across a kobold patrol of the dragon's enslaved minions and their guards, right? And if the party doesn't get rid of these kobolds in one round, then they're going to blow a horn and it's going to wake up the dragon. And now every threat level, all of the things that could go wrong in this one shot are going to go even worse. Now you're not just trying to be stealthy and fly out of here as quick as you can. You've got an angry dragon breathing fire down these passageways, roaring, trying to follow you. The tension and the fear of this can ramp up the DC of these checks you're needing to make. It can all just compound and get worse and worse and worse, and almost, you don't not literally send your one shot into a death spiral, but the fact that this timer was failed just means, like, guys, I'm sorry, but that means like everything is about to become a whole lot deadlier. And that's going to bring us to tip number 4. In a one shot, when you have reached the end of the night, you've gone through all of your encounters, people have used their spells, they've gotten to do cool things, they've interacted with the NPCs, and it's all coming down to like those last 5 minutes where you're like, all right, clearly the energy is waning, let's wrap this up. That's where the final roll comes in handy. And a final roll is like that. This is the binary yes or no, does the party live or die, succeed or fail type of challenge. And I think it's only useful at the end of the night where everybody, like, even if the whole party TPKs in a one shot, it doesn't matter. That can be fun. That can be hilarious. If you're a GM and you've run a one shot, you have some years of experience under your belt, you've probably experienced this and you know what I'm talking about. Like, when everybody dies, they can all of your players can still be laughing and having a smile on their face, but the caveat is you need to have let them get through some of the other fun stuff and been successful with it. You do not want the final roll to happen too early. And so, how do you apply this? Oh, I also want to point out, like, a final roll does not mean everybody has to die. It could just mean the failure occurs, but you're in a perfect place to go into the next one shot. Now for the examples, right? Our desert caravan. The party has already traversed the desert dunes. They've lost half of their caravan, but the oasis city is within eyesight across this vast plain of just flat sand. And this final skill challenge is a group dexterity or a constitution saving throw challenge to just make this mad dash sprint and outpace these purple worms that, as the party's like running, it's trying to eat them. And there's like 6 of these things following the party because they failed a couple checks before, right? If the party fails this group skill check, then what that could mean is the caravan escapes. The caravan makes it into safety, but the party who's been kind of hanging back, keeping the worms at bay, throwing spells and attacks at it, they are eaten. They're devoured by a purple worm. But you lead into the next one shot by saying, like, you're not all killed. You now find yourselves trapped in the intestinal tract of this purple worm. And if you guys want to do a one shot again, you'll have to escape this thing, right? That's a great way to end the night. Like, they still succeeded. They still got the caravan there, but now they're all going to probably be digested. Or with our dragon escape, the flying carpet is in flames, gold is spilling over the edge, but they can see the escape. It's within eyesight, and everybody just has to make this strength saving throw to hold on to this carpet for dear life as it, like supersonic speed, tries to escape out of the exit. And anybody who fails, they are ripped free of it. They fall down into the cavern where they're devoured by the dragon, or they're incinerated by the fire, the dragon's breath that is following them out the exit. And even if one or only two people die out of the group at the end of a one shot, those losses, the sadness of it, right? That can still be entertaining for the group. And those are my 4 tips for running a one-shot that has a real sense of tension. There are stakes involved and there are consequences, but not ones that derail the whole one-shot 30 minutes into the game, right? If you've got other tips, leave them in the comments for other GMs to steal. Right now, I think we all have a responsibility to try and bring as many people into this hobby as we can and have them excited to play and set them up for success. And one of the best ways you can do that, I think, is to help the church out, right? So leave your like, all that kind of stuff. Go check out the Doom Stronghold zine. We went up another $100 just since yesterday's video. If you haven't heard about this, that's a shocker. I talk about it every single day. But it's a zine, handmade. I've got my copy right here, full of random tables. Wow, it's backwards. But it's full of random tables to help you flesh out and build an awesome stronghold to give to your characters in your D&D campaign. So go check that out. Link down below. Also, if you are wanting to play in a D&D one-shot, you're like, I don't really want to run one, but they sound really cool and I would like to get into D&D. Every Sunday on Start Playing, I run a Learn How to Play D&D 5e one-shot. It is the Son of Strahd. That is the name of the campaign. You all find yourselves prisoners of this Dampier, this like half vampire, the supposed son of Strahd, the iconic vampire villain of D&D, and he's going to try and sacrifice you to bring his father back from the dead, and you need to escape his crumbling dungeon before that happens. I've ran it a couple times. It's been a ton of fun. $15, 2 hours. You'll learn all the basics. I've got pre-generated characters. All that homework is basically done for you, so I'll have that linked down below. But that's it for me today. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate all the support you've been giving me this year. And we say these things in their unholy names. Amen.